Now,
Good to be here.
we'd all agree that Netflix is pretty much an audience-driven organisation. So what I want to do is just get to know our audience here today a little bit before we dive in. So put your hand up if you have a Netflix subscription, please. Pretty much most people. Okay, now keep your hand up. Keep your hand up. If you have ever cheated on your partner with Netflix.
They're like, she's awful.
Okay.
Why did they invite her here?
Interesting.
I knew what the question was going to be.
So I think that clearly marriage counselling is not something that's in the Netflix repertoire, but you have a lot to answer for. So how did...
True.
Give us a bit of the backstory on cheating becoming part of our television viewing lifestyle.
Oh, man. Well, this goes back to the very beginning. And so a bit of a history lesson for you guys. So I started at Netflix in 2013. I like to correlate that to House of Cards Season 1, because it's an easy way to think about it, right? And so, when I started, we had just launched House of Cards, and we were trying to figure out what our brand narrative was. And at that time, even when I interviewed for Netflix, I remember being like, Netflix? They want me to, I don't know if I want to go there. Like, it's the DVD company. And then they launched House of Cards, and it was like, yes, I see what they're doing, and I want to be a part of it. But and so we were trying to figure out how to tell this brand narrative, and one of the things that kept coming up was this idea of cheating, and also this idea of binging, especially with the release of House of Cards all at once. That was something that had never been done before, and we saw it already. We saw it on via social channels with like Breaking Bad and Mad Men. I mean, people were binging those series, and the thing was like, at that point in time, in 2013, binge was kind of like a really naughty word at Netflix. We kind of called it the B word, because it just kind of exuded this idea of like someone in their sweatpants eating Cheetos, and it's just not something you necessarily want to relate to your brand. And so, what's that?
It's true.
But binging can be, I think binging could, it's true, but it can be a really positive thing. I mean, I just binged Ozarks with Jason Bateman, and I was like, it felt good. It felt good to complete something.
But were you cheating?
No.
Okay.
I was honorable.
So you don't need to cheat to feel good about binging?
No, I kept it real. Okay. Yeah. Although I think my husband might have cheated on me a few times with that one. So we were trying to figure out how can we frame up this idea of these folks binging something, and then this idea of watching ahead was born, and it was our first kind of, Netflix had done spots before, but this was our first real brand spot and our first chance at like really dipping our toe into something where we were starting to really tell a brand narrative. And I think we have it, yep. The video, should we play it?
Yeah, let's play it.
Let's play it. Let's just go down
memory lane.
It's our old logo. It still goes like that, like for a creative person. It's like, old logo.
So Netflix is clearly an entertaining company, but it's also becoming more famous for its use of data today. So how does that all work in relationship to understanding and redefining our TV viewing as a cheating behaviour and binging? How does data fit into that construct? Because they're very cultural, very personal things.
Yeah, well, I think with watching ahead, it was something, so when the spot launched, we had a press story behind it too, and we found 28 million Americans were cheating on their spouses, Netflix cheating on their spouses. And it was something like, hold the phone. Like it was on the Today Show, it was on evening news. People were running the spot, and as a marketer, to have someone running your spot, your commercial essentially, it was like a dream come true. It was so amazing. And so, we decided to reinvestigate this a few years later, so just recently, in 2017, we decided to figure out, we were like, I wonder if the stat has increased, and we were launching Michael Bolton's Big Sexy Valentine's Day special, so it seemed like an appropriate time with which to do the research. And just back to your question, as far as like that data mining, I think this is an example of something like really creative that we saw, and I have to give our consumer PR team credit, because they were the ones who really kind of saw this insight and saw it kept coming up in social, and then decided to really, mine that data. And so in this case, we reinvestigated it. We found out the stat had tripled, which was crazy. And so we enlisted the help of Michael Bolton to release a really creepy video that I'm going to show you about Netflix cheating.
Cool.
It's a little creepy.
We've all been there. Even someone like me, Michael Bolton. Your special someone isn't around, you turn on Netflix, and you just can't help but watch without them. do the right thing and say, I'm sorry. Lo siento mucho. Aldrich Mir. Tiene questo gattino. Toi, Pucci, s'il te plaît, pardonne-moi. Tell me, how am I supposed to binge without you when all that I've been binging for is gone?
A little creepy, right? A little.
So, first and foremost, Netflix is still a content company, and earlier today we talked about how it was a DR company driving content, and then it sort of became data, and now it's becoming content again. So, as a marketer, how do you bring those things together for inspiration and insight?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's interesting hearing you say, first we're a content company, because I feel like, from the outside in, we look like a content company, but internally we're still very much a tech company. I mean, our headquarters are in the Silicon Valley. We have a boatload of engineers, and from its inception, since 1998, Netflix has been rooted around its product and its data. And so, when I'm sitting in meetings, we're always talking about kind of data. But it's funny because we have become a Hollywood company. There's no denying it. You sit in our lobby, and it's like the best lobby in Hollywood because you see anyone from like Will Smith to, Lily Tomlin kind of. I don't know if Lily Tomlin's a good one, but anyhow, you see. I find her impressive, but you see this amazing, barrage of talent kind of come through. As far as content and data was your question?
Yep.
I get on a roll. I think it is very core to what we're doing. As a marketer, we're always trying to look for trends. And so, for instance, we're launching Bright with Will Smith in December, and it's our first really big film. And so something that we're looking at a lot are like, what are the trends that we're seeing with films being viewed on the service? Because we know we can launch original series. We know we're great at that. But with films, and especially big films, how can we get great at doing that on the service? And how can we learn from the service to inform our marketing? So that's something that we're looking a ton at, And I think there's, as far as data internally at Netflix, I think there's really two paths. There's like the data that's more of the business side, which is, we're doing statistical analysis and modeling to see kind of how big these shows are going to be. And that helps inform our big bets, right? Like that helps us prioritize whether we're going to go big on House of Cards or Narcos or Orange is the New Black. And then we have kind of the creative side, which is something that informs something like, some of the executions we're doing around Fuller House or Gilmore Girls, I think is a great example. We did these a ton of analysis around Gilmore Girls, and we saw that every single time we posted something on social, it just exploded. And the trailer for Gilmore Girls exploded. And I don't know how many Gilmore Girl fans there are in the audience. Oh, there are some, all right. But for those of you who are probably familiar with it, we did these pop-up coffee shops across the US. And we actually didn't spend a whole lot on that campaign, but it felt really big. And part of that was because of those coffee shops. And it was a really simple execution. We called 200 coffee shops, which seems like a lot of work, and it kind of was, but we let our agency do it. And so they were glad to do it. And so and they're an amazing agency. And so they called all these coffee shops local kind of mom and pop coffee shops. And just so you guys are aware, the non-Gilmore Girl people, it's like Luke's Diner is this coffee shop that's really core to the story. And so we called these coffee shops. We said, hey, do you want to be a part of this? We're going to, send you coffee cups that are branded with Luke's Diner, some hats and aprons. And these people went nuts. Like they went like dressed up as the characters and were marketing the show for us. It was amazing. In Beverly Hills, there was a coffee shop where people slept out overnight in Beverly Hills to like get a coffee cup. And so it's unreal. But it was the data, that really informed us that this was something that we could really, make some noise with. And that's something that we're, just with all the original series that we have coming down, that's constantly something that we're trying to kind of like figure out is how much, where can we really place our bets? And where can we place our bets with more of effort versus, dollars?
Cool. I can understand wanting to sleep out in Beverly Hills. West Hollywood's probably not as good a place. If you're going to sleep out, let's face it, it's probably
West Hollywood's pretty nice too.
Not a bad spot to go sleeping out. So one of the things we've learned over the last couple of days is the data game is never ending. It's perpetual. You can't stop, and you can't think that you have an answer because there'll be another one in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So how do you approach the exploration and discovery of new models and analysis of data and collecting it and using it in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and that's another. I sound like I'm repeating myself, but it is something that's core to our business. We're constantly thinking about how we can test and break the edges, and we'll make really bold swings. So we'll turn off TV in entire countries. We launched Orange is the New Black one season 4 hours early. Like, these are really, really big swings that we'll take, and I think that's really important. I remember sitting with Reed Hastings, which is like a very out-of-body experience because he's our CEO and he's just brilliant. And then when you sit across from him, you're like, I'm looking at my body and it's talking to Reed and this is happening. But anyhow, so I was talking to him about testing and telling him, oh, this test is kind of expensive. It's probably going to cost like $4 million. And he's like, no, double it. Go. Like, just make sure you see something, because when you think about it, all the time and energy you're spending on testing, all the work that's going in to it with our data scientists, I mean, everyone who's trying to like read something, you might as well pick up on something. And so that's something that I've really taken to heart working at Netflix is really being able to take these big, aggressive testing swings in order to get that learning, get that hypothesis right, and then kind of just taper back.
You did say $4 million testing budget and doubled it, didn't you?
For one test.
For one test.
But I'm
envious.
Yeah.
So one of the key challenges...
Well, you're talking about Netflix that has, we have $1 billion marketing spend, including our media. So, yeah.
I know.
Yeah. It's big.
Yeah. It's just, small change.
It's play money.
Small change.
Easy.
But you do have a big challenge, even though you've got a $1 billion marketing budget. In my eyes, as someone that's been around brands a long time, is that balance between Netflix, which is a distribution service, a subscription model, and a brand, versus the things we actually fall in love with. The characters, the programming, the content. The Orange is the New Black is what we like to watch, or things like Breaking Bad are all pieces of content that we connect with emotionally and culturally, and you deliver it down some form of pipe. So given that's the truth in many of the cultural connections, how do you try and give meaning and relevance to Netflix?
As far as a Breaking Bad versus an Orange is the New Black?
Or is Netflix the pipeline versus the content that comes through the pipeline? Yeah.
No, it's, how we look at things. It's interesting when you look at what Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, said about Netflix is he actually credits Netflix with that show surviving. And so licensed content, so your Breaking Bads, your Mad Men, your Moanas, Sing, those are really important to our business. And especially as we grow internationally, we need to have that familiarity of content. And so what you'll see is in the US, we're not really spending behind our licensed content. You're not seeing us promote the heck out of Rogue One. Where we are spending is we're spending behind our own content. So Narcos, Orange, et cetera. And so it's license provides something that's really more about getting people familiar. So when they sign on to Netflix for the first time in India, or they sign on to Netflix for the first time in Korea, they have something that's familiar, and then hopefully they start to move over to that original content.
Cool. So I think one of the great things of the last few years that we can all probably appreciate is the quality of content that's coming out from all of the providers. And that's creating a whole different scenario on the back end, which is competition. In fact, it's reported there's going to be some 500 TV shows scripted over the next 12 months, more than double the amount only 6 years ago. So how is Netflix going to shift marketing and product approach to bring awareness when there's more and more content and we're segmenting down to individuals and their likes and dislikes even more? How do you manage that as the market gets more and more crowded?
Yeah, no, I mean, I struggle with it just as a person. I feel like I have so many shows that I'm trying to get through. I would say as far as it pertains to Netflix, I mean, one of the things that we're being really thoughtful around is you hear this amount of hours and it sounds scary. I mean, trust me, I break out in hives every time I think about it because I have to promote it on the service. we're really focused on things. You saw Club de Cuervos, our Mexican series. We're doing more of that. And so we have Ingobernable with Keito Castillo that launched recently, which was actually phenomenal. I watched it, and it's interesting because this is just kind of a tangent, but I do think it's really interesting how these shows that are meant to be kind of focused on an audience maybe in Mexico can become these like global phenomenons, and we're seeing that with some of this content. That being said, we are trying to program to the rest of the world. And so, we're looking at original series in Italy with Sabura. We have an original series we're looking at in India right now. And so, as much as it sounds like a lot, I think you can see a lot of that focus happening internationally. And hey, maybe it's going to be something you're going to enjoy as well.
What about coming from different services? Facebook and Apple are joining the original content game with a lot of money. Amazon continues to throw money at content. HBO's, CBS Everywhere's, these are creating a shift in the landscape.
Yeah.
How do you think about the deluge of streaming services and content options ultimately now meaning we should choose through services, not just content?
Yeah, I think, when I hear about the competitive landscape, it's especially with more digital providers, I think it's really exciting. I think, anything that can illustrate to people that they're not tied into a cable bundle. I mean, I rode with my Lyft driver from the airport last night, and he was telling me he spends some god-awful amount, $190 a month for cable. And I think it's really exciting to be able to shift the mindset of these consumers and not have it just rest on Netflix's shoulders, And ultimately, look, the best content is going to win. That's what we see time and time again. And so, that's the pressure on us, is to continue creating great original series and films and stand-up comedies and kids series.
So there's not an anti-Apple algorithm that you're working on?
Well, if I were to say anything, maybe slightly competitive, I think like what you see with Netflix is we really focus on our core. We stay extremely, extremely focused, and that's a huge tenet to everything. Every single person in the company, they have one goal, and it's really providing the best content there is out there. I think Apple has other priorities, and so will that play out in our content? It's to be seen.
So I want to finish with one last question, and it's quite an important one, I think, for everyone that works within these evolving worlds where data is more and more part of our life, in agencies and clients. So I want to talk about the topic of culture. Netflix has a hearty respect for technology and data, as you said earlier. But what sort of culture balances the big risk-taking, the $100 million investment in a house of cards with, the often misguided belief that data will give us the answers? And, how does a culture continue the growth that you've had and balance that at the same time? Because it's a little incongruous at times.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think, I'm glad you're hitting on culture, because it's so critical to how this company has seen success. And I think it's easy to point to Netflix and say, oh, it's the data. They have so much data, and that's why they're doing so well. And I would argue it's because of the culture. The data gives us some, a road to go down. It gives us a direction to go, and gives us, some, it gives some proof to maybe this is the right direction. But for the most part, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Netflix culture deck, but it's an interesting document, and it's really about freedom and responsibility. And what that means is that you have the freedom to really pursue whatever projects you need to pursue and get it done in the manner that you need to get it done. But you have to be responsible kind of with your partners and with your whether it's PR, social, what have you. And when I look at some of the biggest bets that we've done, when you think about The Crown, and that was definitely reported as far as how expensive that show was. And you mentioned the $100 million bet for House of Cards. There were some inklings as far as the data was pointing in those directions, but for the most part, those were really, really big bets. And they were very big creative bets. And creative is not conclusive, right? And so I think that's something to, just to really point to when you hone in on what's making Netflix successful. I think it really comes down to the culture and the way that it empowers its employees to really do what they need to do.
So if I gave you one word to use to define Netflix culture, what would that be?
One word to define the Netflix culture. Well, it's hard because it's freedom and responsibility. Focus.
Focus? Okay. Please join me in thanking Megan for coming all the way from LA today.